Ladies and gentlemen, we are live, as this is the main event you've all been waiting for. Brought to you by Axonius, the cybersecurity asset management company. It's time!
Bridgecrew is the all-in-one cloud security platform for developers. Bridgecrew analyzed thousands of open source Helm charts to bring you the newly released State of Helm Security Research Report. Learn their security insights and more at bridgecrew.io/CSP.
So I'm glad we made it here. I'm assuming you can still hear me.
I can, yep.
All right. Is my screen stuck, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I guess this is how we do live stream, I guess. So Eli obviously knows this, but my MacBook has been playing up on me today. But that shouldn't be a reason for me to not come up on the stage. And it's working now. I'm going to ignore this. But dude, welcome. And I know I promised you a song. I'm still going to play this though. So let's pretend you just came in now.
All right.
I appreciate that, man. I'm going to switch off my camera. Otherwise, it'll be distracting for everyone who's watching. But until the other MacBook decides to not die on me. But before I start, man, thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate you came in. And I know it's a bit of an evening time for you as well. So I appreciate you hanging out with me. I was going to ask, so for people who may not know, I have been following you for some time on LinkedIn. And so for people who may not know who you are, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be here. So let's see here. My background, well, currently I'm a principal product manager at AWS, focusing on a product called AWS Security Hub. I've been with AWS about 3.5 years. And prior to AWS, I co-founded a company called Squirrel, which AWS acquired in January 2018. Squirrel became Amazon Detective, and I broke off from the Squirrel team and helped launch AWS Security Hub. Prior to AWS and Squirrel, I was in the federal government for about 9 years, doing cybersecurity strategy and policy mostly, and doing that in a few different places, first at the Department of Homeland Security, and then at the White House National Security Council staff. I live in New York City, at least for the next couple of weeks, then off to the Connecticut suburbs.
Oh, nice. Obviously moving out.
Yeah. It's been planned for a while. New baby girl and COVID accelerated those plans.
Oh, congratulations. Great news, man. So that definitely time for bigger space, I imagine.
Yep, that's the plan.
Fair enough. It's
more closets in a yard.
Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of friends who've moved to that life journey as well. So you definitely need a bit of a yard, for sure. I was going to ask, it's a really interesting journey. You actually worked for the federal government in a way. You're working in the government space for cybersecurity, and you transitioned over to the private sector as well. So have your definition for cloud security changed between moving from government to private, or what do you define as cloud security?
Yeah, well, while I was in government, there wasn't much usage of the cloud. It certainly has exploded in the last 5 years or so. But so my definition of cloud security is shaped by my experiences at AWS. So, when we first come to AWS, we all learn about the shared responsibility model. AWS responsible for everything hypervisor and below, and customers responsible for everything above the hypervisor. Although I feel like that shared responsibility model is oftentimes misconstrued, and in that, we're not leaving customers to their own to figure out cloud security. Our goal, my specific goal at AWS, is to try to develop tools and services that make it really easy to get cloud security right in AWS. But where I've really been going and talking to a lot of customers about, in terms of cloud security, is really thinking about cloud security in a different way as traditional on-prem security, where traditional on-prem security really was viewed as a cost center and something that slowed down development teams. Whereas with cloud security can really be an enabler to innovation and allow those cloud development teams to move faster, build applications faster, because things can just be automated a lot more in the cloud than in traditional on-prem security processes. So yeah, I think that's it. I think the great thing about cloud security is that it can not be viewed only as a cost center, but really as a way to push business forward.
Interesting. And yeah, it seems like definitely you have a very Amazon definition of shared responsibility. It definitely doesn't leave you hanging for sure. I've got a few comments coming in. I've got hi Ankit, hi Dan. He's wishing you congratulations as well, proud father. There you go. All right, so we've kind of got the cloud security pieces out, but people obviously want to know about threat detection and how do you kind of manage this in cloud, and especially AWS, I guess. So before we just start into this, I wanted to understand what are some of the common TTPs, tools, tactics, and the procedures that you kind of come across where you see quite common in the AWS customer space.
Yeah. So, one of the really interesting offerings that AWS has is actually a professional services offering, not a tool, but a ProServe offering called AWS Zipline. And they help customers with security issues, security incidents, events. And they went through and mined all of their data on what are the top root causes of security events or incidents that they've seen. And there were several things that bubbled up to the top, really sort of in terms of those root causes. One of the root causes, and I don't think these things are going to be a surprise for folks that are familiar with cloud security, but one of the top root causes is misconfigured resources and configuring resources to be publicly accessible when they shouldn't be. The most classic example about this was, publicly accessible S3 buckets and folks scanning the internet for those and finding sometimes sensitive data. AWS has now put in place a lot of different types of security measures, different layers of security to make it really difficult to make S3 buckets public. But if that's not the only resource that can be misconfigured, it could be Elasticsearch instance that's made accidentally public. Misconfiguring those types of resources is still one of the top root causes of security incidents.
Yep. And sorry, you go on. I was just going to quickly add that ever since Amazon has made the S3 buckets private by default, that's really changed a lot of things for people.
Yeah. And then there's tools like Security Hub and Macy and GuardDuty and IMAX Analyzer, who are detecting open S3 buckets. And then there's, of course, the new Amazon S3 block public access feature, which you can just set a feature so that S3 buckets can never be made public in an account. So that's definitely one primary root cause for security issues in AWS. Another important one is deploying insecure applications into AWS. So the top two use cases for AWS as a whole are one, data storage, people just plopping down their data into AWS, and two is hosting web applications, so building applications, hosting them on AWS. And those web applications can be vulnerable. So, deploying those web applications with CVEs that are remotely exploitable, not checking your code for common web application attacks like cross-site scripting or SQL injection attacks. All these things can be exploited to cause a security issue. And then I would say, the last one, and and certainly not least, is unintended disclosure of security credentials and secrets. And the classic example here is, people baking access keys into their code repos, and then folks scanning code repos for access keys. This is actually a service that we do for customers. Like, we are always scanning GitHub repos for AWS access keys, and then first turning off, disabling those access keys, and then alerting customers of their unintended disclosure. But there are other types of credentials that could be unintendedly disclosed. One of the worst ones would be your root credentials. In AWS best practice is to lock away those root credentials and never use them. So certainly unintendedly exposing those can cause major issues in terms of security events. But it's really those top three things in terms of categories that are the root cause of most security events that our Zipline team investigates.
Interesting. And actually, it's good to know the three categories that you guys kind of address these by. Does this change between, say, like a smaller organization using AWS versus a bigger organization, or is it just the scale of how big the buckets are, I guess?
Yeah, it doesn't change much at all. We see these being the root causes across all size of organizations. Certainly the bigger organizations have bigger attack surfaces, so that there's more to secure. But ultimately, most incidents that we see come down to those three root causes, regardless of the size or scale of your AWS usage.
Yeah, no, that makes sense as well. So what's a good point for someone to start? When I say a good point, I mean like if someone's starting today and they want to, I guess, build a practice using AWS native tools like the Security Hubs of the world, and where does one start? And what do you normally recommend for people to, like, I'm going to build a practice for threat hunting today inside my AWS environment? How do I go about doing that?
So when we work with customers who are getting started with AWS, we help them think through the build out of their security capabilities through the concept of epics. And the first epic deals with building a strong identity foundation. So thinking through your strategy for how you want to build out IAM roles. Optimally, you're not using IAM users. Instead, you're using a federated identity management system. So connecting up your IAM roles that you build out to something like Active Directory and federating in so that you don't use long-term credentials. The next epic is building out a strong foundation in terms of network access. So building out VPCs and network access controls and security groups to limit what type of traffic can access your resources. And it's not till a later epic, like the third epic, when we start saying, okay, once you have those foundational security capabilities in place, strong identity control, strong network controls, should you start thinking about putting in place threat detection and other security tooling. The security tooling that we recommend today to be on in every single account, regardless of what workloads you're running, are GuardDuty, which produces threat detections across a wide variety of threat actor TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Yep. And Security Hub, which does a number of automated security hygiene checks, looking at your resources and ensuring that they are set up in a way that aligns to security best practices. So those are the two ones that make sense to get started with. And then from there, you should be expanding out. You should have a vulnerability scanner. One of those key root causes I mentioned, having multiple web applications hosted in Security Hub. You should have a vulnerability scanner. There's the AWS native version, Inspector. A lot of folks also use third-party tooling. like Qualys or Tenable or Rapid7.
Awesome. So are there any, I guess, people who may be starting this and want to build it for scale? So there might be a small organization at the moment, but they obviously are hoping to make it a bigger organization. Everyone wants it to be a big, successful one. So are there any challenges that you hear of from people when they're trying to implement AWS Security Hub or any of the tools that you mentioned? I imagine, especially because my understanding is AWS Security Hub needs to be enabled per region as well, and it doesn't centralize at the moment. So you kind of have, well, it kind of centralizes, but not really. But I'll let you explain that. I wouldn't spoil this kind of event.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just put into the chat here. There is an awesome new document that came out within the last month or so called the AWS Security Reference Architecture. And I would say that this is must read for anyone that's in AWS cloud security. It is extremely comprehensive. And a lot of really smart folks spent a long time building this out. But, you know, I'll try to summarize some of the key points around it. When starting out with building out AWS security tooling, you should be thinking about this from a multi-account, multi-region perspective. And we provide guidance about how to think about setting up a multi-account structure for your AWS usage. It all starts, though, with organizations. Like, everyone should be using AWS organizations. AWS organizations is a way of managing your accounts, and AWS organizations has the concept of OUs, or organizational units. And we recommend you building out a security OU. And in that security OU, you would have an account that's dedicated to security logging. So that account would be where you'd be primarily aggregating all of your logs from your different tools. And then you should also have a security tooling account. And the security tooling account is, in particular, you would set up an administrator account. And that would be where you have the administrator accounts for your various security tools like Security Hub, Guard Duty, Macy, Detective, etc. So I mentioned an administrator account. Let me back up and explain what I mean by that. For our various security tools that are integrated with organizations like Security Hub and Guard Duty and Macy, you have the ability to set up an administrator account and then link member accounts to it. So you'd want to deploy those tools, those services, in every account that you're using. And then you would designate one account as the administrator account. And optionally, it's the same administrator account across all of your security tools. And that administrator account has permissions to see all of the security alerts across all of your member accounts. And that's automatic. You don't need additional IAM roles or things like that. Once you set up an administrator account, it automatically has permissions to see all of the security alerts across all of the member accounts. And the nice thing about organizations is that it automates that whole process. So you can automatically say, hey, I want this administrator account, and I want all of my accounts in my organization to be linked or to be member accounts to that administrator account. And then as new accounts are added to that organization, they automatically are enabled as member accounts. So you can sort of set it and forget it. Once you set up this integration between your AWS security tools in organizations, any new account that comes online, that your application teams create, that it is also automatically enabled with these security tools. As you mentioned, most of our security tools are not cross-regional yet. So that's actually our #1 feature request for Security Hub, and is something that we will be launching this year.
Awesome.
So it'll give folks a similar type of capability in that you'll be able to set a home region and then link regions to that home region, and that home region will be able to see all of the findings across all linked regions. And you'll actually be able to automatically keep your findings in sync between your home region and linked region. So if you make an update to a finding in a home region or in a linked region, that update will be automatically replicated across your regions. So if you ever need to like switch back to a linked region for, resilience type issues, you can, and it'll have all the latest updates to your findings. So that's a really important one. Customers are really excited about that one.
Wow. Yeah. I think thanks for giving us a first shot at listening to this. Maybe so all the 10,000 plus people who can listen to this probably get a brief intro. Maybe I'm assuming a reInvent, I guess, is what you're waiting for.
In general, it's interesting. In general, we will release features when they're ready. We typically don't save features for reInvent. So, yeah, I mean, there's certainly exceptions there, and different teams in AWS operate in different ways. But I like to get value in our customers' hands as soon as it's ready. So I'm not going to typically like sit on a feature for 2 months and wait for reInvent. Like if it's ready, I want to get that in customers' hands as soon as it is ready.
That's awesome, and good to know as well. I guess because I've personally always had looked into it as well, so that'd be definitely a great feature. So I wonder if one of my feature requests made it through for that as well. But it's definitely good to know that it's considered that when people do put in feature requests, they do go into that pipeline where someone in AWS does see it. It's not, and it is prioritized and it's worked on as well. So that's great to know from as a customer.
Oh man, it's so important. I mean, it's the #1 way we prioritize our roadmap is how many customer influences are on this feature. And it's a really well-oiled process. So every time an account team hears a feature request, they go into this database, they add a customer influence. The product team is watching this in real time as these customer influences are added. And, it would take a lot. There would have to be a really good reason to not prioritize the things that are at the top of that product feature request system in terms of which ones have the most customer influences. So it's really important.
That's even better to hear. So we spoke about Security Hub. Well, obviously, and as a great way to kind of manage the threats. Out of curiosity, because you did mention other products as well of AWS Security. And I mean, I guess from an AWS Security Toolset perspective, like what are some of the other ones that you recommend people should be using? I'm curious if you say all of them, but what are some of the easier ones to start off with so they don't get scared off by a lot of alerts to work with, I guess?
Yeah. So, folks usually start off with Security Hub and GuardDuty. If you are hosting a web application inside AWS, it makes a whole lot of sense to switch on Shield Advanced. Mm-hmm. All customers get basic DDoS protection via Shield. But if you want more advanced DDoS protection and essentially someone to call if something bad happens, you should turn on Shield Advanced. That's a really important one. There's a whole bunch of other relatively newer services that come out. Like the amount of innovation that's been happening inside AWS recently is really exciting to watch. We came out with a new AWS Network Firewall service recently that is using the Suricata engine under the covers. We have a web application firewall service. And with that web application firewall service, you can actually use rules from other third parties So you can like use F5 rules in the AWS WAF, which is pretty cool.
Interesting.
And then we have our vulnerability scanner inspector. We have Macy, which is primarily a data classification service. So scanning your S3 buckets, looking for sensitive data. And we have another relatively new service, Amazon Detective, which came out of the Squirrel acquisition, which of course I'm familiar with. And that is designed to be a threat investigation and threat hunting service. So, with threat hunting, threat investigation, usually that is for slightly more mature security teams, especially on the threat hunting side. Usually threat hunting is not something that like the 1 or 2 person security shop has bandwidth to do, but as you expand out and you want to go beyond the security alerts that are already being fed to you and start searching for the unknowns in your data, that's where threat hunting comes into play.
Yep. And to your point, I guess you kind of have to start somewhere. So it sounds like AWS kind of gives you the foundation to start off with it, at least.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Some of the other services, I mean, there's some additional tangential services. So there's AWS Config, which does resource monitoring. Security Hub actually uses Config under the covers. So the automated security checks that we do are powered by AWS Config rules. That's all transparent to the customer, meaning the customer doesn't need to configure those rules. We configure them on behalf of the customer. There's also a new service that launched last year called AWS Audit Manager, which is AWS's foray into the GRC world. So that's automatically integrated with Security Hub. So any of the automated checks that we do are pumped into Audit Manager, and you can produce cryptographically signed audit reports that you can then hand off to your audit team.
Interesting. Oh, wow. So good. I think that reminds me, there was a question this weekend on the live stream about Audit Manager and just the experience with Audit Manager of different people. Not sure if you've had have any examples where people have been able to use Audit Manager at all. Totally fine if you don't. I wasn't sure, but there was a question asked by one of the audience members in the live stream last weekend, I think. And I think it does GRC, it does have compliance checks, which is what a lot of CSPMs or Cloud Security Posture Managers also do as well. So would that be, I don't know if you had a chance to look into like a comparison for if it does the same thing or if it's a bit more.
Yeah. So let's see here. So Audit Manager has a few different types of data being fed into it. It can ingest Security Hub's security checks. It can ingest config rule evaluations. It also can ingest data from CloudTrail and AWS License Manager. And the way to think about some of these big regulatory frameworks is that there are some things in them that can be checked in an automated way. And that's where like Security Hub's checks or configs rules come into play. And then there are other things that require more manually collected evidence. So like a classic item around that would be, do you have an incident response plan in place? That's a control required by lots of different regulatory frameworks. There's no way for Security Hub to automatically check for that. So what Audit Manager does is it gives you workflow to assign that particular control to someone to upload that evidence. And then it's automatically collecting evidence for the controls that can be checked in automated ways, via Security Hub. So yeah, it has support for, I don't remember the exact number, but I think somewhere around 20 different regulatory frameworks now. And it has mappings to Security Hub checks and to other data sources to automatically populate evidence for those different controls in those different regulatory frameworks.
Interesting.
Deloitte put out a really nice white paper about how they use Audit Manager. So like some of the big consulting firms that do these types of GRC edits they're now using Audit Manager as well.
Interesting. Oh, I might take the links for those resources and probably add to the show notes as well. I've got a question here, Bahari, I think F. Bahari. Any advice on NIDS and VPC traffic monitoring with Zeek? So Zeek's like a network monitoring tool, like a open source network monitoring platform, for lack of a better word, I think, from what I'm understanding. And that kind of begs the question: how do you see people use VPC traffic mirroring and network monitoring on AWS? Any advice on that?
I have not seen a lot of it, to be honest. Certainly, so we have the VPC traffic mirroring capability that was launched, I think about 1.5 years ago. But what I see more of is people using guard duty for threat detection. And the new AWS network firewall service, mainly because one, guard duty is just stupidly easy to use. It's like one click and that's all you have to do. Yep. And then with AWS network firewall service, it abstracts away all the complexity of trying to do this yourself. So okay, how do I hook up Zeek with VPC traffic mirroring? It allows you to have a fully managed experience to do network intrusion detection without all that heavy lifting. So honestly, I don't have a lot of advice about how to do it yourself. I think my advice is use our managed capabilities instead.
Let's try and put it into security, because I think that kind of has been a common question. Even I think we were talking about this last weekend as well, where a lot of people ask about the choice between Security Hub and a SIEM solution. It doesn't have to be a big one. What does that really mean? Do we need a SIEM if we already have AWS Security Hub, or what do you? I mean, I guess, how do you compare the two? I guess first of all, I need both?
I wrote an internal FAQ about this after we launched Security Hub, because it was one of the most common questions we got from customers. Is Security Hub a SIEM? And the short answer to that is no, it's not a SIEM. There are some, I actually think of Security Hub more as a CSPM tool, a cloud security posture management tool, but a cloud security posture management tool that also has some SIEM-like functionality. There are two things that Security Hub primarily does. One, it aggregates all of your security alerts related to your AWS environment, and it automatically normalizes them into a common data format. We call it the AWS Security Finding Format. And that has a lot of SIEM-like characteristics, or at least in terms of the value proposition, it's SIEM-like. But we're not a SIEM in that, one, we're only focused on AWS security alerts. So, we're not focused on trying to ingest alerts from your on-prem environment, from your multi-cloud environments. And we're not a general log ingestion tool like a SIEM. We're not ingesting lower level event logs like VPC flow logs or CloudTrail logs. We're really just ingesting the more curated alerts that are produced by other security tools. The nice thing that we do that SIEMs don't do is that, with SIEMs, you have to parse and normalize all that data that's coming into them. We really use the advantage of being AWS to say, hey, if you want to integrate with Security Hub, you have to send us the data in an already parsed and normalized state. So we have this well-typed JSON data format called AWS Security Finding Format. It has 1,000 fields in it, and all the data comes to us already populated against that format, which some of our bigger customers have I'm proud to say, have said that's really become the gold standard for how to normalize security alerts. So we see a lot of customers getting value out of just that aspect.
Yep.
And then, in addition to that, though, we do these automated security checks like you would see in a lot of CSPM, cloud security posture management tools. And from our perspective, if you really want to holistically understand your security posture, you need to do both. You need to do those automated security checks, but you also need to look at those in combination with all of your other security data and the alerts that are being produced by your other security tools. So, we think it's a really important combination of capabilities.
Awesome. And that I hope that answers the question for a lot of people about SIEM and AWS Security Hub. One another question from Joe Burke here. Is AWS Security FedRAMP approved? I'm assuming he's talking about the tools in AWS Security, so the ones you mentioned so far. I believe they are, right?
Yeah, so AWS Security Hub specifically is approved for both FedRAMP High and Moderate. So that means it can be used in US East 1 and 2 as FedRAMP Moderate, and it can be used in AWS GovCloud as FedRAMP High. That's also the case for GuardDuty. I'm not sure about all the other ones, but definitely Security and GuardDuty are both FedRAMP High and Moderate.
Which is a basic foundational piece to start with. So I guess at least that would give people a good head start on doing security in AWS. That kind of makes me think, as we kind of go through different products, is there almost like a workflow of a mature organization where you would consider the benchmark for, hey, this is what someone did to manage threats in their AWS environment, which is either fairly large or not fairly large.
Yeah.
What's the workflow for that where that you can operationalize this thing? I guess we've been talking about setting it up, but how do I operationalize this?
Yeah, and that actually loops back to your SIEM question as well. So last year, we did a really cool webinar with Goldman Sachs and their security team. Actually, we'll be publishing a blog post here in the next week or so with some sample code that is aligned to what they laid out and rolled out. So it's always really exciting to be able to speak publicly about a really marquee customer like Goldman Sachs. But what they've done with Security Hub, I would consider to be sort of like the peak of maturity.
Okay.
And it's a really amazing workflow and setup that they have. So they're using Security Hub as the central aggregation point for all their AWS security alerts. And this not only includes the other AWS security services, but also includes third-party tools and homegrown tools. So,
all right.
They have a whole bunch of like homegrown analytics that they've built out over time, and they're also ingesting those into Security Hub. With Security Hub, you can really ingest any type of data as long as it is properly formatted, as long as it adheres to that AWS security finding format. So that's all coming into Security Hub and is automatically, in a normalized state as it's ingested. And then they're actually using EventBridge heavily, and they're doing a number of enrichment workflows. Now, some of these workflows will bake into the product as native features. Like, this is one of the things I love, like watching how customers are using the tool and customizing it, and then baking those customizations in as native features over time. But, one of the enrichments that they're doing is they have a separate database that has all of their resource owner information. So for this resource, who is the person inside the organization responsible for this resource? And they're using an EventBridge rule that calls out to a Lambda function that calls to that database and then writes that resource owner information back into the finding itself, which is a really important piece of information if you want to operationalize that finding downstream. They're doing some other types of enrichment as well, like they're customizing severity scores based on specific business logic that they have, also using EventBridge rules. Like our integration with EventBridge is really critical way that people are operationalizing Security Hub. And then once this data is enriched, they have additional EventBridge rules that are auto remediation and auto response workflows.
Okay.
So like a typical auto response, and I think about those as different things, fixing it versus, taking the next step to address it. So, in terms of auto response, one of the things that they're doing is really cool is, for certain types of findings, like a guard duty finding, identifying unusual behavior on EC2 instance, they're automatically grabbing the memory from that EC2 instance and saving it for future forensic analysis. So they're using a step function, which is the target of event bridge rule, to go and grab that memory and drop it off for future forensic analysis. And then in terms of auto remediation, one of the key things that they do, and frankly, we even do this internally inside AWS. This is like how our internal AWS InfoSec team thinks about auto remediation. In production accounts, you need to be very careful about auto remediating things when auto remediation means a destructive action. So you're typically not going to want to enable any auto remediation that involves terminating EC2 instance in a production account, because you don't want to brick that production workload. But there are plenty of things that you can auto remediate that are non-destructive in nature, like CloudTrail logging being turned off. That should be never turned off in an account. That should be automatically turned back on whenever it's detected to be off. Oftentimes encryption can be non-destructive in nature. Some encryption you need to be a little bit careful about, like turning on internode encryption on SageMaker. That can actually slow down some of your training jobs. But like unencrypted EBS volumes, things like that, those are typically things that you can also auto remediate and wouldn't be considered a destructive action. So thinking about destructive versus non-destructive actions and thinking about prod versus non-prod accounts is sort of a key part of that process towards operationalizing Security Hub in a mature way. And so building out those automated remediation response workflows through those lenses is typically what we see customers do. And then whatever's left over, going back to the SIEM discussion, dump the rest of that into a SIEM. And hopefully you're pushing less information into your SIEM at that point. Like one of the other cool things that Goldman did is, and they exponentially reduce the volume of information going to their SIEM, is one, they're auto remediating as much as they can. And two, like the really high volume log storage stuff, like CloudTrail logs or VPC flow logs, they're actually just dumping those into S3 buckets and not putting that into their SIEM, and relying on tools like guard duty to chew that data and spit out, the really important things, but, using, Athena to query that data when they need to and reduce your SIEM bill. So all that data doesn't need to be stored in the SIEM.
I love it.
One last thing, I know this has been a mouthful, but one other really important piece to operationalizing your security findings, integrating with the ticketing system. Like that's a must do, because this is also one of the really important differences, I think, between on-prem security and cloud security, is that in on-prem security, when you're dealing with like lots of laptops, typically all those alerts are pushed into a centralized security team, a security operations center. Maybe if you're a big organization, you have a traditional 3-tiered SOC operation with 3 tiers of analysts. But with cloud security, you don't really need to centralize all those security alerts within a SOC, because a lot of these security alerts are about misconfigured resources or web applications that have security issues that need to be fixed. It's typically not a SOC that's going to triage and fix those things. It's typically the DevOps engineers, the application builders. So having a mechanism to push these findings out via tickets back to the DevOps engineers, the application builders, is critical. So that's also another key decision point, is thinking about, okay, which of these issues do I want to push to my centralized security team? Usually it's threat detections, right? Like things that guard duty is detecting on. And which of the things do I want to create tickets for and push out to the DevOps engineers? And by the way, that's how that resource owner enrichment step is really important, so that you can make sure that that ticket gets assigned to the right person. And then being able to monitor progress about, how well those tickets are being burned down.
Interesting. And I think to your point, that to what you said, there might be some work required before you kind of go down the journey as well to find the right resource owners, so you don't probably overloading them as well. So I imagine there's a bit of prioritization as well to the alerts coming in. Like
yeah. So all of our alerts come with default severity labels: critical, high, medium, low, or informational. But we typically see customers, and this is also an area where you can expect to see some more native features around in the near future. But we typically see customers wanting to customize those severity scores. So, okay, this is a default medium severity issue, but when it happens in my production account, I want to bump it up to higher critical. That's a pretty typical thing. Or based on the resource tag or based on the account tag associated with this finding, I want to bump up the severity score to X. And that's also another good use case for event bridge rules today. But yeah, prioritization is really important. Inside AWS, this is sort of internally how we do things. We use the concept of campaigns. So it's not typically possible to fix everything all at once, right? You need to figure out priorities, and we call those priorities campaigns. And the goal will be to, pick, what the current priority or small set of priorities are. Make sure your resource owners are ticketed for any open issues against those priorities, and then closely monitor the burn down of those tickets. And the way that we like to do it is create cross-organizational visible dashboards. So for each of our VPs reporting up to our CEO, how many open issues do they have against that campaign? And no VP wants to be the worst. No VP wants to explain to the CEO why their organization is the worst at this critical security campaign. And that information is visible across organizations. So the transparently reporting out on this stuff across the organization naturally drives activity towards an improved security posture.
I love it. I love the approach, and I think that definitely makes me go, actually, that'll be interesting, because when you're implementing this across the board, once you have the priority right, the other challenge would be, how do you drive different teams to take action on this as well? And that's a great example. Just increase the visibility of this in the circles of people that are hanging out. So that definitely goes a long way, man. So we've spoken about how AWS can be used, or AWS security tools can be used for threat hunting. We spoke about the compliance piece as well. We spoke about the workflow as well. I think one of the examples that you spoke about with Goldman Sachs had done, and EventBridge came in quite often. How do you see people use EventBridge? If you have some more insight on that, where in terms of security teams are triggering, I guess there's an event happens, they have a trigger that launches a Lambda, then an auto remediation, or what's the mature workflow there? And it's something that scales.
Yeah, so EventBridge is an event-driven workflow system. Think of it sort of like webhooks. And nice thing about Security Hub is that in the administrator accounts, for the EventBridge feed associated with the administrator account Security Hub, you have all of your findings across all of your accounts. So you can centrally build out EventBridge rules in your administrator account, and you can build those out in such a way so that the execution of those rules, so the actual remediation or the response efforts, can occur across accounts. So set up the rule in the administrator account, and then the remediation can execute in the member accounts. That from our perspective, that's the simplest approach, just in terms of configuring and managing rules. People want to do that in one place as opposed into each account.
Yeah.
We actually have an AWS solution that does this for customers today. So if you Google AWS Security Hub remediation solution, it'll take you to the AWS solutions page. And the way that actually works under the covers is that we primarily use system manager runbooks, although it could be a Lambda function or it could be a step function. All three of those things are typically used in remediation, and all three of those could be the targets of event bridge rules. And we deploy those system manager runbooks on your behalf into each member account. And then when the rule fires in the administrator account, a cross-account role is used to actually execute the remediation in the member account. But in general, like event bridge rules are a security team's best friend. They can not only be used for that automated response or remediation efforts, but it can also be used for any type of enrichment or finding modification efforts. If you want to add a note, if you want to change the workflow status, if you want to change the severity score, that can all be done using an event bridge rule that calls Security Hub's batch update findings API to actually make that change to the finding.
That's awesome. I know we've been talking about a lot of AWS security products so far, so I do appreciate your patience on this one as well, man. I think I got a lot of value out of it. I'm sure a lot of other people who are listening got value out of it as well. But I've got one more section that I have on the podcast. It's called the fun section. It's non-technical, just three questions about yourself, just so that people get to know you a bit as well. I think I don't know if I actually had the Bridge Crew people come in for the thing. But before my video got stuck, did the Bridge Crew thing come in? As in after the experiment, did that happen at all? Or that didn't happen in the beginning? I don't even remember this anymore.
Yeah, it's. I think the Bridge Crew advertisement got a little bit cut off. It played,
did it?
Yeah, it played a little bit.
The reason I brought that up is because I think you have as an association with the Bridge Crew folks, as well as, they're obviously the sponsor of this episode as well, along with Exonius. But they, I wanted to shed some light on the other side of your life as well, which is the entrepreneurship, the Squirrel that you did, which got acquired by AWS, and your investors as well. So, can you share a bit about that side of this as well, where some of the promising companies that you're looking at the moment, which you've invested in? I'm sure you have a few favorites.
Yeah, well, it's been a really exciting thing that I've been able to get involved in over the last couple of years. After the acquisition, I started doing some seed investing. Actually, Bridge Crew was my first seed investment, I think. And it's a funny story there. So I'd met Idan Tendler, the CEO of Bridge Crew, actually in the Squirrel days.
All right.
I think you might have lost audio there for a second.
No, that's right. I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. So anyways, I met Idan while actually, right as when FortScale got sold to RSA. So Idan was the CEO of a company called FortScale, and FortScale was actually a competitor to Squirrel. So I was closely watching everything FortScale was doing. And it got sold to RSA, and, reached out to Idan and congratulated him. And, he's an entrepreneur at heart. And so it wasn't long before he got started with Bridge Crew. And, I was there with him from the very start when it was, just a couple of slides trying to to pull together the idea. But they built, they really built a market leading tool in an incredibly short amount of time. I don't think that there's a better tool out there today in terms of scanning CloudFormation and Terraform templates for security problems. And it's amazing the velocity in which they built out that capability.
Awesome. And yeah, I think I've had Barak and Matt as well from Bridgecrew, who probably did a good demonstration of what Bridgecrew has been able to do as well. Such a community-driven thing as well. So it's pretty awesome, man. But I still do have 3 questions for you.
Yeah.
So people should know a bit more about you. The first one being, what do you spend most time on when you're not working on cloud and AWS security tools?
Yeah. Well, gosh. Yeah, it's funny. I was telling someone before, like, I thought I worked hard. I worked very hard at Squirrel, my startup. But the pace here at AWS, it feels like not much has changed here. Like my life is still definitely tilted towards work in terms of my work-life balance. Definitely spending a lot of hours, trying to build out AWS security services. But the things that I love outside of work. So I have a new baby girl. She's 6 weeks old. So that's certainly been my number one focus outside of work, being a new dad, which has been a lot of fun. Beyond that, things that I wish I spent more time on that I haven't been spending a lot of time on recently. So I love Muay Thai. So I've been practicing Muay Thai and for the last 10 years or so. But that's been slipping as of late. I've been trying to balance out my fight sports with country club sports. So I've also enjoy golf and tennis and try to get out there to hit some balls whenever I can.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I've always good to meet another fellow Muay Thai person as well. Although now I'm switching more to boxing more than Muay Thai because that feels more natural. But yeah, it's pretty demanding sport as well. So understandable, man.
Yep. Yeah. It's there's a certain zen about it.
I agree. Actually, next question on I guess the Zen thing reminded me of another question then. What is something that you're proud of, but is not on your social media?
Oh, man. Something that I'm proud about that's not on my social media.
A lot of people have family or something else that they've done outside in terms of volunteering work, but something that comes to your mind for something that you've done that is not on your social media.
Well, I mean, I imagine you could probably dig through this on my social media, but yeah, I'm really proud of the friendships that I've been able to maintain over time. I grew up in a small town, about 7,000 people, and my closest friends are a lot of them are the ones that I started going to kindergarten with.
Really.
So it's been amazing, seeing that group of friends evolve over the last, almost 40 years now. So that's something I'm really proud about. Is, a really, really close knit group of loyal friends.
That's pretty awesome. And good on you for maintaining relationships since kindergarten, man.
Yeah.
I don't think I have a single friend who's from my kindergarten, or at least. So good on. I mean, it's a hard one to maintain for after all these years. So good on you for doing that.
Yeah, preschool actually, not even preschool, not even kindergarten. Yeah.
Oh right, so from preschool.
Yeah.
There you go. Wow. I need to take some tips on you for how to do this and find some preschool friends of mine. So apparently I used to hang out with. I've got one more question, and we'll close out after that. What's your favorite restaurant or cuisine that you can share?
Oh gosh, that one's a lot easier. Which maybe it's surprisingly easy given how many amazing restaurants there are here in New York City. But there's one in particular that's been my favorite for many years. Joseph Leonard's It's a little tiny restaurant inside West Village. It's not particularly fancy, but just has an amazing vibe. If you're in New York, have a seat at the bar at Joseph Leonard. It's like the service there is amazing. Really cool people that work there, and just I think the quintessential New York City dining experience.
Interesting. Oh, so what kind of food is? I'm assuming Italian food, or
no? It's very standard, just American.
All right,
like an American grill type place. Yeah, but everything done very, very well.
All right. I'm definitely gonna try it out when the next time we can fly out of Australia and come to New York. Awesome, man. This was really awesome, and thank you so much for spending the time with us. Where can people reach out to you if they have any follow-up questions, or where can they? I guess, where do you hang on social media?
Yeah, LinkedIn's usually the place I spend the most time. So definitely feel free to reach out to me there.
Awesome. And for everyone else who's joining in, I'll see. I guess thank you, Eli, and feel free to definitely connect with Eli after this and slowly bombard him with questions if you have any, but only the good ones, obviously. And for everyone else, I'll see you this weekend when we have a collaboration going on with another podcast. But until then, I will see you all soon. And thanks, Eli. Really appreciate this, man.
Thank you. All right.
All right.
Have a good one.
Bye.